Okay, perfect. Thank you, Matthew, for the nice introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohamed. I'm from the University of Munich in Germany. It's a pleasure to be here today to present this work, which was done in collaboration with the University of Stuttgart, Munich University of Applied Sciences, and Max Planck Institute for Informatics. My co-authors are Anita Baier, Niels, Henze, Florian, and Andreas. So let me start by asking you a question. Could you take a look at this photo? Can you tell me what's common in all of these photos? Any suggestions?
They all are photos.
They all look, but
They all are photos.
yeah. Anything else more common?
Occlusion good.
Occlusions, no?
They're not very good.
Yeah, they're not very good. Perfect. Yeah, these are all right answers. So the thing is, all of these photos are taken from the front-facing camera of mobile phones used in the wild, so in daily scenarios. So the thing is, front-facing cameras have come a long way since they were first introduced in smartphones. And we now have very high-resolution cameras and even depth cameras, like for example in the iPhone 10. We also have the necessary processing power to carry out highly complex computer vision tasks, such as face detection, eye tracking, and this allows for a whole new range of mobile apps that employ computer vision directly on the phone without any kind of modifications. So yeah, they're becoming an app installation away, basically. And yeah, this is basically a very exciting time to run computer vision algorithms on mobile phones directly, and we've already seen in research and also in industry applications. For example, you can think about doing facial analysis and tagging photos or posts on Facebook with your smiles or your emotions. There are also a lot of work about eye tracking, for example, attention analysis while reading on smartphones, and enhancing the user experience by tracking their eyes directly through the smartphone. But then, actually, we did a project a few years back where we used eye movements to unlock phones, so like unlocking your phone by moving your eyes. And a problem we noticed is that the way people hold phones has an influence on the visibility of their faces. And you might wonder, if you have a picture like this, and I ask you, is there a face in this picture? You probably will tell me yes. Do you see eyes in the picture? Probably yes. Then, well, why can't we do face detection, or why can't we do eye tracking? What's the problem here? Now, the thing is that many of the computer vision algorithms out there, they will tell you no, there is no face because there's no mouth, and no, there are no eyes because there's no face. And actually, there are algorithms that work in such scenarios, and they can detect eyes and do eye tracking, for example, in such an image. However, recently there has been more emphasis on other methods that rely on the presence of a full face in the camera view. And this makes perfect sense for a desktop scenario or public displays. However, when it comes to mobile devices, the dynamics of mobile use makes things a bit different. You don't always have a full face visible, you don't always have the eyes visible. So this made us wonder, how often do users actually hold their devices in a way that allows capturing their face or eyes? And how does the holding posture influence detection accuracy? And how do different mobile tasks, the different things that you do on mobile phones, how do they influence eye and face visibility? And most importantly, how can we increase the face and eye visibility in the front-facing camera of the phone? So to answer these questions, we conducted a field study. So we developed a mobile app, an Android app that collects photos from front-facing camera of mobile phones, and we recruited 11 participants for a 2-week field study. And from that, we collected and analyzed 25,000 photos in addition to usage logs. So things like readings from the accelerometer, readings from the gyroscope, which application is running, and so on. And just as a teaser about the results, the full face was visible only 29% of the time in our data set. So our Android app consisted of 3 main components. So first there was the photo and data collection component. And basically this component ran in the background and it collected photos from the front-facing cameras as people used the phone. People had to explicitly opt into the photo collection process, and they could opt out at any time. And we took pictures at different times, so at different triggers, we call them. So, for example, we took a photo from the front-facing camera once the screen was turned on. So this is influenced by previous work in unlocking phones, for example, using your eyes or face. We also took photos once a notification was shown and once it was accessed, and once an application is launched, and later on several times to see how the face and eye visibility develop as you use the app further, when the orientation is changed. And we also had some random triggers throughout the day, so from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening, we took 6 photos on random intervals. And along with each photo, we collected things like accelerometer readings, running application, and so on. And then we had an experience sampling component. So basically a questionnaire was shown after each of the 6 random triggers that I spoke about earlier. And here we asked things about like how was the phone held? Was it held by the dominant or non-dominant hand? Was it held by both hands, or was it on a surface? What was the posture of the participant? Was the participant lying in bed? Was the participant walking, sitting? And whether the phone was being used exclusively or if it was used in parallel while doing something else. And finally, we had the photo review component where participants were prompted to tell us which pictures they would like to share. So by default, no pictures are shared with us unless they are explicitly approved by the participants. So they would pick the ones they want to share, and then they were uploaded to our FTP server. Yeah, so we recruited 11 participants. 10 out of 11 allowed us to make the photos available for scientists and researchers. So if you'd like to get a copy of the data set, you can get in touch with me. So you just need to fill in some forms for ethical approvals and so on, but we're happy to share them, and also the analysis that we already did. We had one meeting with the participants before the study where they installed the app, where we installed apps on their phones and gave them instructions and so on. So we actually installed the app on their own phones. We decided to do that so that we wouldn't give them newer phones that they would take time to get used to. We didn't want to influence their behavior. And then we conducted a 2-week field study, and we had another meeting in which we did an interview with the participants. So in total, the app collected 30,000 photos, but participants had to choose which ones to share, so we ended up with 25,000 about photos which were seen by us and analyzed by us. And out of those, as I said earlier, one participant opted out, so his data is not in the data set. And also, we had some photos actually that included people other than the participants. So, for example, a friend of the participant, or strangers who appeared in the camera. So we don't have approval from those, so we had to exclude those photos too. So at the end, the ones that we are able to share are the 20,000 ones. So we had cases where the full face was visible, like entirely visible and clear, like in here. We had cases where the full face was in there, but there was an obstacle in the way, so the user's fingers, hands, and so on. Sometimes due to the user's posture, the face is not entirely visible. Sometimes it's just the eyes, both eyes, or a single eye. Sometimes it's just only the lower part of the mouth. Sometimes something like the forehead, and sometimes there is no face at all. And interestingly, the cases where there is no face at all account for about 30% of the cases, which is almost as much as the cases in which there was a full face in the view of the camera. On a more positive note, so the cases where we had both eyes visible, so not necessarily the entire face, but both eyes are there, we had about 48% of the cases in our data set. So I will, the results are explained in details in the paper, and here I will focus more on the insights, or what can we learn from the results. So the first obvious lesson is that the full face is rarely visible. So in our data set, we had only 28% of the time where the full face was visible, and almost equal amount of time where the face was not visible at all. And there were many, on the positive side, there were many cases where the face was partially visible, and even more cases where both eyes are visible. And here, a lesson is that the eye tracking and facial analysis algorithms should not rely on the full face. So as I said earlier, there are some methods out there that rely, for example, on the whites of the eyes to detect the eyes to do eye tracking, and we should shift focus back on that, and we should really take a step back in research about eye tracking and face detection on mobile phones, and think about the context, and instead of borrowing concepts from other fields, we should actually come up with context specific for this area. We manually inspected and labeled all the photos in our data set, but we were also wondering how would state-of-the-art algorithms for face detection perform in our data set. So we picked the OpenFace algorithm, which is a public framework. It's been used a lot since it's been published, and we tested it against our data set. And the first striking thing is that you'll see that in cases where the whole face is visible in the screen, so if a human looks at the photo, you would obviously see a full face. However, OpenFace would only find 75.9%, would find faces in almost 75% of the cases. So almost a quarter of the cases where there's an entire face in the screen, OpenFace was not able to find it. And it's not because OpenFace is bad, it's actually built for specific settings, right? And this again tells us about the suitability of existing methods in mobile context. And when looking at the entire data set, it only succeeded in finding a face 33% of the time. Yeah. And on a positive thing is that when people are using applications on the phone, there's a higher chance that their face and eyes are visible. So we found that the face is mostly visible when watching videos on the phone, when using social apps, when using messaging or typing on the phone, when you're gaming. And one thing we can learn from here is that these mobile apps can greatly benefit from eye tracking and eye detection. So really start using eye tracking and face detection in your apps. So I think that's a really exciting time for eye tracking and face detection on mobile phones. And then think of all the in-the-wild studies that you can also do now without modifying the user's phones. So why are faces not visible? Most of the time it's the holding posture that is behind it. So in all of these photos you can see that it's the way people are holding the phone that mainly influences the visibility of the eyes. And one thing we could do here is that you can use the sensors of the device to guide users to hold the phone in a way that would reveal their faces. Or you could actually also, because face detection and eye tracking, these are highly complex computation tasks that consume the battery, they overheat the device, and maybe you could use the device's sensors to know whether it's a good situation for tracking the eyes. For example, I forgot to mention earlier that one of the main reasons OpenFace failed in finding faces was due to motion blur and lighting conditions. And you could also detect the lighting conditions actually from the phone with the phone's sensors, and maybe this could give you a hint whether it's worthwhile to invest into taking a picture and tracking the face and doing all the necessary processing or not. And there are other reasons as well. So for example, users' clothing or accessories, like if a person is wearing sunglasses or scarves, these could hide parts of the face or the eyes. Also the user's hands and arms, and also the activities of the people, like whether they're eating, drinking, smoking. And these problems are becoming more prominent in mobile contexts, and this is something that we need to look into in the future as well. One final interesting aspect, actually many of our participants were surprised that we can install a mobile app on their phone that takes pictures without actually showing them the view of the camera. So people are used to taking selfies, they see themselves on the screen, but they were surprised that a mobile app can do that without showing them what it's recording. So one of them actually asked me, so like my Facebook app has permission to use my camera, does this mean that it can be taking pictures all along? So this raises an important point that there are privacy implications of all of these kinds of computer vision mobile apps. So apps, in my opinion, like apps that leverage computer vision, they need to communicate to the user what they're doing. So you need to tell the user that you're actually leveraging the camera, you're doing some processing, face detection, and so on. And second, these algorithms should be transparent. So ideally, we would know what's going on in the background, like what is being done with these photos. And one way to do that, for example, is to make sure, to enforce a policy to make sure these apps are open source, or have some sort of, for example, something like a certificate authority that, for example, makes sure that a mobile app does not violate the user's privacy. So to summarize, the full face is not always visible in the front-facing camera's view. So 30% of the cases in our dataset, approximately, the face was not fully visible. Computer vision mobile apps should not assume that the full face is in there. And we should utilize the context, for example, based on the sensors of the phone to know whether or not it's a good opportunity to track the eyes and the face. And there is a need for face detection algorithms that take the dynamics of mobile phones into consideration. So not just that there's a full face or not, but also like things like motion blur, the people's clothing, obstacles that could come in the way. And we should design computer vision applications on mobile phones with privacy implications in mind. And with this, I would like to conclude. So thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions.
Thanks for the research presentation. My name is Jan. I'm from Vienna University of Economic and Business. You already touched upon privacy. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, you said that using the app was opt-in, so the participants had to opt in every time, like give you active permission to take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how often did they opt in? How is there like a percentage of time that the participants gave you permission to take pictures? And how do you know anything about those not uploaded pictures? Did you ask whether there was a full face in those pictures, you know, or what was the reason behind them not being disclosed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. So actually, it's very difficult to conduct that kind of studies. That's why we only had 11 participants. Regarding the second question, because that's what I remember the most, regarding the opt-out, yes, we had cases like people telling me, okay, I actually didn't take the phone with me to the toilet, for example, or I switched off the app because I was on a trip with my girlfriend, and we had some private moments. As for the opt-in, so usually they would do it in the morning, like, so it's not like explicitly for each and every photo, but they would opt in the morning, and then at the end of the day, they would pick the photos that they would like to upload. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Did you notice any change in the types of photos that may have been uploaded at the start of the study versus those at the end? Was there any influence in the photos that they were taking, you know, throughout the? Did you notice any trends change?
Well, we didn't find any obvious changes, or at least we didn't notice any. However, we asked them actually if they changed their behavior, and that's how we learned about situations where they, for example, didn't take phones in certain situations, and this is, of course, might have an influence on the results. However, yeah, that's a limitation with this type of studies in general. Okay, so if, as I said, if anybody would like to get access to the dataset, get in touch with me. I'll be happy. We actually welcome people to build on over our work, and ideally also if you'd like to build eye tracking and computer and face detection approaches that would work in these cases, that would be ideal. Thank you.